So we're going to start how black men are progressing. Have you guys read this yet? Did you guys even know that they had a report on black men making it in America? Have you guys ever seen? Put a 1 in the chat if you know that they've been keeping tabs on black men making it in America. You rarely hear these types of conversations on YouTube. The engines of economic success for black men in America. Look at that. And they got a military guy on there for a particular reason. Did you guys also know that they actually have an interview that describes what the hell is going on with these actual numbers and to see if black men are actually improving or not? So the guy that we're going to be listening to, this gentleman right here, Dr. Ronald Mincy, he is the one that actually conducted the American Enterprise Institute report on black men in 2018. The research conducted by AEI, the W. Bradford Wilcox, and Columbia University's Ronald B. Mincy reveals that while black men face a unique set of challenges in America, let me pull myself up here, there are a discrete set of practices that can help African Americans settle into the middle and upper class. And you guys, I know you guys like, man, who is Dr. Mincy? Let me show you. The Maurice V. Russell Professor of Social Policy and Social Work Practice and Director of the Center for Research on Fathers. Fathers, Children, and Family Well-Being. Dr. Mincy has been a professor at Columbia University since the year 2000. So yes, this brother is more than qualified. This doctor is more than qualified to speak on these issues because he's the one that actually did and led the research in regards to these topics. All of Dr. Ronald B. Mincy's research rests on the premise that for the United States to reduce poverty and provide equal opportunity for all, policymakers must address the problems faced by young, uneducated black men who continue to have the poorest life chances of anyone in our society. So that's who we're going to be focusing on. And I'm proud to say that Dr. Mincy has done amazing work. And he is definitely an advocate for black men. He tells the truth about what's going on from a political standpoint and also what's going on in the black community.
General context, we've obviously seen both journalists and scholars like Ta-Nehisi Coates and Michelle Alexander kind of drawing attention to the ways in which kind of...
So this is the interview, but I want y'all to notice something. Watch how hard it is for him to try and, I guess, broach the conversation of black men and the struggles that we've had in the past in the United States. He's very hesitant to talk about it, but we got to have these uncomfortable conversations, man. Let's continue. Fair use.
Sort of these big issues around race are particularly consequential for black men and for black boys. And, you know, their work has been important and valuable. At the same time, though, I guess, speaking frankly, one of my concerns is that people both in the society at large and in the black community in particular may be or may have in either in recent years or for
you see how he's hesitant. He's stuttering, but we got to talk, man. We got to let it out. Let's go.
A longer period of time developed a needlessly pessimistic view of the place of black men in the society. So there was one study that was done by Opportunity Agenda, and they were sort of tracking how the media depicts black men. And what they found was that words like poverty, incarceration, and unemployment were kind of disproportionately applied to black men. You know,
did y'all hear that? Poverty, incarceration, unemployment were words that were disproportionately used to describe black men. And these are the things that I've been telling you guys over the past year. There's a narrative. They say these types of things to make our women and, you know, the United States as a whole think very low of black men. They do that for a reason. You see how the conditioning works? So that's why you have a lot of black women. They go out here and they say things like, you know, we have more businesses. We make more money than black men. We're, you know, more employed than black men. This is where they get those narratives from, because It's a social conditioning that's happening, and these things need to be addressed. And I'm glad that AEI decided to do their review of how these messages are portrayed to our community, in particular incarceration, because like I said, we had our women out there thinking that 50% of black men were incarcerated when it's less than what, 3%? It's an agenda, man. Black men, we got it rough out here, but we doing our thing. Let's continue. Fair use.
Over and above the actual trends on the ground for black men. So do you think that there is, sort of a kind of an overly negative picture out there in the society at large, and even among African Americans in particular, when it comes to black men?
Oh, I think there is, and in part, I think this has much to do. Among the people I would associate with that is, of course, the work of Michelle Alexander in her, advanced discussion and very well documented and well received discussion of mass incarceration. And so, not only documenting the real condition of African American. I recall being in an audience talking about. It was mainly middle-level government administrators of a variety of programs. It must have been in child support. And we were cycling around this area of mass incarceration and the effects of that on child support obligations. And so I said, in a way, just to connect with the audience, how many of you in the audience, which are mostly middle class, many women, many African American administrators in child support, how many of you have a friend, or close friend or relative who is incarcerated? And I was amazed that 60 to 70% of the audience had a friend or a relative who had been ever incarcerated. So I think this sort of pervasive, that fact and again the attention drawn to that and the damage that it is inflicting on the African American community does create this pervasive view of this pervasive negative narrative. Right. And there's little discussion on the other side, which is why I was interested in co-authoring this report.
Right, and so kind of the concern in terms of highlighting kind of the more negative parts of the story is that, as Alan Jenkins, who's the executive director of Opportunity America, wrote, is that you may be kind of deepening, in his words, sort of expectation and biases on the part of potential employers, teachers, healthcare providers, police officers, and other stakeholders, regarding black men. And then in turn, that may also affect how black men and young black males kind of see themselves and their own prospects for the future. Do you think that's a legitimate concern, that people sort of perhaps overly negative views about black men in America might foster bias? And
I think it does, and I think it also provides excuse for bias. So let me just give you one poignant example. I think the defense offered by police routinely, right, who are involved in shooting of African American men is, I was in fear for my life. Right. And I think the pervasive discussion of African American men as perpetrators of crime gives opportunity for that excuse, and in some cases legitimizes that excuse. And right, so people feel in general, and the police in particular, which is, I'm really concerned about this, don't have effective interpersonal relationships with a lot of African American, but they hear this constant drone of the threat of African Americans as men as criminals and the like, and as a result, that I think contributes to a pervasive view, negative one, about African American men, and puts them at risk. And I think it certainly creates a narrative that African American parents have difficulty working with, and young people may well, hearing this constant drone, also frame their own futures in a way that aren't very positive. And so, and I will have to admit that my own research has been part of this. Much earlier in my career, I was very much, as I mentioned yesterday, attracted to and it seized my attention, this book that was called Young Black Men and Endangered Species, and that was, I remember this is in early 1990s, and as a result, many scholars of color went after trying to understand the nature of the risk that was discussed and continue to pursue a research agenda that is about better understanding the risk factors that pervade the lives of African American men and boys. And fortunately, I think that's turned the corner in some ways. But I think it's high time that we begin to tell a fuller story about the experiences of that cohort of African American men and begin to reframe the way we think about young African American men today and what their futures might look like if we do some things.
All right. So, and I'm glad he said that. He said, man, my outlook was focused on the negative side of what black men were doing in the past. And I told you guys, I was very clear. During my 20 years in the military, I was not focused on what the black community was doing. I was focused on what the military was doing and what my mission was. When I got out of the military, I started to get more curious in regards to the stereotypes or the narratives that I heard about black men. In particular, the one about most black men, all the good black men being deleted, gay, or in jail. And I had heard all my life that damn near half of the black population, black men, were in prison. And it always didn't sound right to me. But then when I started doing the research for myself, I was like, man, why the hell would people be lying like this? And it's because of the fact that this narrative is being pushed that the majority of black men are bad and the majority of black men commit crimes. We already looked at the FBI statistics and we showed how everything plays out. The numbers that you guys see reported during political season is not actually what's true.
Right.
Okay.
So in terms of kind of presenting a more accurate picture of what's happening with black men in America, is it the case that most black men are poor? Is it the case that most black men will be incarcerated? And what else do we find in this new report?
Well, I was surprised that more than 1 in 2 African American men are in the middle or upper class. And
did you guys hear that? More than 1 in 2 African American black men are in the middle or upper class. These are the things that I actually did the research on to show you guys so you could have proof. And then people are like, man, I heard this from Kevin Samuels before. I have too. But what I used to see in his comment section is every time people would ask, where did he get those stats from? Y'all just be quoting out stats and don't tell us where it's from. And I was like, you know what? That can be fixed. So I did the research and I started to do current updates on what was being said and the issues that Kevin Samuels used to have when he was trying to tell women the statistics and also men. So that's where I come from. Yeah, lost translation. Black demographics has a lot of them too, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. And that's why I dedicated my work to actually teaching people how to do the research for yourselves, how to make sure that it's current, how to read statistical data. These things all matter when you're trying to explain this stuff to a group of people who just don't like black men. And even if you explain it to the best of your knowledge, they may not accept it as well. We've all seen that in these spaces, right? So yeah, so I definitely used to see a lot of folks questioning Kevin Samuels' statistics, but I took it a step further and I show you guys the reports. I post the links. I provide everything so you guys can do the research on your own. And that may even not work, but as long as we know.
And
right?
so it definitely belies this idea that most African American men are incarcerated or are poor or anything like that. And so I think that's a very important finding, and I think one that I hope will get a lot of attention in the public, particularly in the African American community, among stakeholders who are trying to work with men and boys. I think the other upside that surrounds our report is entering into a time where the work around African American men and boys, or men and boys of color more generally, is turning to the positive and trying to galvanize, led in a lot of ways by former President Obama in the Men and Boys, in the My Brother's Keeper initiative, right. The way philanthropy, including the Executive Alliance, is now pursuing, men and boys of color and trying to figure out, a variety of interventions that will promote their well-being. And I think our report documents that more than 1 in 2 African American men are in the middle or upper class, and that is something that I would not have believed on the front end of our report.
And even him as a Columbia professor, he was like, man, after doing the research, I almost didn't believe it, because what we hear in this community or in the population or in society is that black men are just degenerates.